Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Kwani Lunis with NBC 10 Boston. And as you can see, I have two guests with me from NBC Sports Boston. We have Tom Curran and Phil Perry to talk to us a little bit about the breaking news that if you did not hear yet, the Patriots have recently just reportedly re-signed Cam Newton to a $14 million deal. So I want to first hear from the two of you. What were your initial reactions to this news?
I'll take the first swing. I think that it is more of a move that's proactive for the Patriots to announce to pending free agents. Free agency opens the middle of next week. That, hey, we have a plan here. We have a quarterback in place. Now, we all understand that Cam didn't perform that well last year as a thrower. And that $14 million contract is actually has a lot of incentives attached. So it's probably closer to $7 million. But I think it announces, Phil, that the Patriots have a quarterback in place. They don't necessarily blame him for the ineffectiveness of the passing game last year. And they think that, hell, a friend in need is a friend indeed. You were a friend to us last year. We'll be a friend to you this year and bring you on back and give it another run try.
Yeah, I think that is important that they have somebody who's a professional football player at that position before they get to free agency, because it doesn't work if you go to whoever, Curtis Samuel, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, and say, how do you guys feel about Jarrett Stidham throwing to you for the next couple of years? You want to sign here right now? And even though Cam Newton wasn't very good last year, I do think he still has some clout with his fellow players based on his history and his track record. So I think that's important. But to me, the part that is a little bit more alarming, if I'm a Patriots fan, is the fact that the Patriots clearly, I think, with this move, didn't feel like last year was Cam Newton's fault. And it certainly wasn't all on Cam Newton. But I think there were some very obvious moments where Cam Newton had trouble throwing the football. And to me, it's still a throwing league. You got to have a quarterback who can throw. And I worry that they're sort of underrating that part of the quarterback position right now.
Kwani, I would add this just to that real quick is the reason that they feel that way, Kwani, is because in some ways you look at the 2019 Patriots and they had Julian Edelman and they had James White at his best. And there weren't COVID opt-outs. And that Patriots team went 12-4, and Brady was fairly effective. The group, they had an offseason. They had a preseason. Cam didn't have those things. He didn't have a healthy Edelman. He had James White going through some off-field issues with his family that were tragic. It was an opt-out COVID season. They didn't have an off-season because of that. So they look at those as extenuating factors that impacted Cam's ability to really assimilate into the system. So that explains why they excuse make as to what the result was, rather than just look at it and go, he wasn't good.
Well, and I acknowledge that, and that makes a lot of sense. I think the thing that people who watch Cam Newton closely, and obviously they did, but I got off the phone with a quarterbacks coach earlier today, and there are some clear, to him at least, and he's studying quarterbacks, and he watched a fair amount of Cam Newton last year because he works for another team, and they had some crossover games. He just has a physical inability at times to put the ball where he wants to. And that's not scheme, that's not receivers, that's not system. So that would be my concern, that a player who is Cam Newton's age and has had the history of shoulder issues that he's had is not going to get better in that regard.
And so when you mention those issues that you think if he can't throw the ball, a lot of people are making the points of, if we're going to have Cam Newton back, we should get him the weapons that he needs, essentially. Do you think that's still a valid case if this quarterback coach is not necessarily seeing that in him?
I do, Tom. I think he could be better than last year, even if he does have some limitations in terms of his ability to throw it. If you put some guys who can separate around him, that gives him much more of a margin for error when it comes to, throw for throw, how he's actually performing. Don't you feel that way?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting if you hit him with the truth serum, Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, the rest of the Patriots coaching staff, and said, would you be disappointed if the season opener comes and Cam's under center? Because I don't think that they're looking right now, Kwani and Phil, is Cam's the answer. We're done here. And I know that most people understand that. It's because he's such a big name and because of the timing of it that I think there's a presumption that, okay, they're settling. I don't. I just really think they're covering their posterior with this signing to make sure that they have someone in place to convince guys who are coming in to say, we have a plan. We can actually start scheming and talking about how we want to look in 2021 offensively because we have this guy, but we're not done yet. And that doesn't just mean the draft. The draft can be a point at which a lot of things shake free. Deshaun Watson is going to have to go someplace. He's not going to play for Houston this year. Sam Darnold is probably going to go someplace once the Jets spend the second overall pick on Luke Will. I always call him Luke Wilson.
Great actor.
I know.
Talented family.
Or Owen. And, there are going to be some other quarterback shoes to drop. What to me this is, they're looking at Cam Newton and then some of the other free agents out there, Mitch Trubisky or Alex Smith or Ryan Fitzpatrick, and saying, no, we'd rather run it back with Cam for $6 million, project it to 14 if he plays well, than have any of those guys come in.
Tom, you also mentioned on your Emergency Patriots podcast that you see this essentially as trying to fix a leaking pipe with duct tape. And if it sticks, it sticks, but you're still not, it doesn't seem as though you're really sold on it. You mentioned a few of the free agents that we could see on the market too next week. Are any of those people, those quarterbacks, do they stand out to you? Or is there someone that maybe you're looking, the Patriots should build in the draft?
Yeah, they really don't. And that's why when I would hit them with the truth serum, Phil and Kwani, I think I would hope that they would say, yeah, we'd be kind of disappointed. But I probably would get an answer that was more along the lines of, yeah, we're okay with it.
We can make it work.
Do it. Yeah, we can make it work. And that, to me, is if they're going to look at all these free agents. And I thought Cam was going to be, Phil, a June signing.
Same.
After everything dried up for him.
Yeah.
And the Patriots, knocked on a bunch of doors and nobody answered. They'd say, Cam, why don't you come back? But that's not how they're doing it.
My thinking coming into the offseason, Kwani, was that there were really two ways they could approach the position this offseason. Number one, they could try to trade for their guy, their starter in 2021, whether it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Marcus Mariota, who I have talked about more than I need to, but who I thought was sort of a viable option. I thought both guys were viable options if you traded for one of those guys. So you trade for them. Okay, they're your starter for 2021. And then maybe you draft a quarterback to build towards the future, but maybe you don't do it early, because if you're trading for one of those other quarterbacks, you might be giving away draft capital. And if you're trading a second for Jimmy Garoppolo, are you really going to spend a first on a quarterback too? That just seems like a lot at one position. So I looked at it as Garoppolo or Mariota plus a late round pick at the position, or a low cost, short-term free agent and a high-end pick. So you're at least giving yourself some long-term hope at that position, acknowledging that whether it's Ryan Fitzpatrick or Mitch Trubisky or Cam Newton, that those guys are short-term fixes at the spot, that you can do that, and then maybe you invest a high draft pick. That would be, if I'm a Patriots fan, I look at this move and I say, okay, well, at least it would make some sense now for the Patriots to make it a Cam Newton and Justin Fields combo, or a Cam Newton and a Trey Lance combo. I think there are Patriots fans that would feel really good about that, because that is a plan. That's not only a short-term plan, but that's a long-term plan too. My concern would be that they look at Cam Newton and they say, well, we're in a weird spot in the draft. We can't get any of the high-end guys. So we're going to go with the low-cost free agent and the low-cost draft pick. And we're just going to roll with that and see how it works. That to me is not a great plan moving forward.
I think we lost Tom, but we'll bring him back as soon as we can. But I did want to ask.
I kicked him out, Trendy. Listen, I see that guy all day, every day. Okay. So when I get my opportunity on StreamYard here and I just want to boop, see you later, hack into the system, make it happen.
I get it. But you mentioned a little bit earlier the circumstances that were out of everyone's control last season. And I think as a result of that, as you mentioned, a lot of people still aren't really down for Cam Newton. So from your perspective, what are some of the positives that fans should be looking to this season if he ends up being the starting quarterback again?
Well, I do think the part about attracting free agents is real, and it's not just because he's an upgrade over Jarrett Stidham. It's because he's Cam Newton, and he still carries plenty of weight with these guys. And I don't know, Kwani, honestly, how closely players are watching Cam Newton or any other quarterback for that matter, who they might be working with in the future, throw for throw. Is Will Fuller out there saying to himself, oh, I saw Cam Newton and he was only, 54% on throws between 0 and 10 yards. No, he's probably, I don't know if it goes that deep. I think they can look at some of the stats, and there are plenty of statistics that would tell you Cam Newton's actually a top 20 quarterback. Now, I think people in New England that watch the Patriots would tell you differently, but he's good enough and his reputation is significant enough that he could attract some real talent. And that's where I would start. Yes, he brings the mobility aspect to the position, and there's a threat there, and it's hard for defenses to prepare for that. But I think it's the offseason where really, if Patriots fans are looking at it and they're not thrilled with the quarterback signing itself, if you understand that this helps you get that receiver, it helps you get that tight end that you want, that's the reason to be positive about this move.
Tom, I don't know if you heard. Yeah, no, it's fine. We made fun of you while you were away, but I just asked Phil what he thought were some of the positives that fans that are a little angry about this decision that they can
I
look.
don't feel confident that I can hear Kwani.
Oh, you can't hear me at all?
But I can hear you, Phil.
Can you can hear me? Oh, how about that?
Well, Phil asked him a question.
Well, we didn't. She did acknowledge. I just want to make sure that you hear it, that we did make fun of you ahead of time. I don't want you to feel like we're doing that behind your back. It was mostly nice. It was mostly nice.
I hope there wasn't any ageism involved. I hope.
It might have been implied. It was technology related. So, yes, actually, yes is the answer to your question. What are the positives that Patriots fans can take away from this Cam Newton edition? Because the mood is overwhelmingly negative, I think, in a lot of places.
Yeah, no, it's overwhelmingly negative. But as with Trent Brown, and the mood was overwhelmingly positive. And I tried to say, can we relax a little bit? It's a guy who's here on a 1-year deal for $6 million. Trent Brown signed earlier this week as an offensive tackle. Same thing with Cam. Can we relax a little bit? It's just these are placeholders. If they work out, great, because they're short money worked out situations. And if they don't work out, neither of these guys are an obstacle in doing more jobs, doing more work at those spots. I think people are offended. I think Phil was offended that the Patriots weren't more offended by the way Cam threw the football. I'm surprised at it too. The last point I'll make to weigh in while we have our disgust over the way it looked when it came out of his hand. When it was under his arm, it looked pretty good. Remember that Cam ran for 12 touchdowns. The second best rushing total was 2, Damian Harris. Good running back. Damian Harris and Cam Newton carried the ball exactly the same number of times, 137. He was a huge component of the running game. He had 55 first downs on the ground. So on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, red zone, he was your answer. If it was 3rd and 1 or 3rd and 2 and Tom Brady was still here, you were throwing 95% of the time, I would guess, Phil. And it wasn't going to yield much. So you have to enter that into the equation with Cam and why they are enamored with having him back as a guy who can not be a great thrower, but at least bring you a dimension that they need.
Yeah, and I think that is difficult at times, Kwani, for defenses to prepare for on a week-to-week basis because you're not, let's face it, how many 6'5", 250-pound running quarterbacks are there in the NFL, right? So it's a unique element that the Patriots would have in their possession to be able to deploy when they need to deploy it week to week. The issue is if you can't throw it consistently 15 yards or more down the field, you become exponentially easier to defend because now all of a sudden safeties don't have to worry about a guy running 20 yards past them down the field. They can be alerting for whatever Cam Newton is doing with the football. They can be that additional runner, defender in the box, So he does bring that, and it is valuable, and it was incredibly valuable to that team last year because they were not built to throw it, even if they had a competent thrower. I think the worry would be you bring in pieces to make the thrower look better. How much better will he look if he's having trouble manipulating the football like most NFL quarterbacks can?
Right. Final question for me. I know you do have to get on your way.
I love this that you can't hear Kwani.
We're playing telephone essentially. No, this is the final question. You can tell him this, but I was curious, we talk about free agency next week and the draft eventually coming up as well. What are some moves that you guys would like to see from the Patriots before we enter next season?
Don't do that to Kwani. She was very nice to you just now, throwing you nothing but compliments, bouquets.
See, I know
who are the free agents? Who are the free agents that the Patriots, we feel like, should be interested in signing? I'll give you one name at receiver and one name at tight end because I think those are massive needs, as most of us do. The receiver name I'll give you is Corey Davis because Corey Davis He's coming from Tennessee, bigger body guy. You can play him on the outside. This draft is loaded with smaller, quicker. Some of them have elite speed to get up the field. So I think you can maybe get one of those guys in the draft. I want a big body at receiver. And then at tight end, I love Jonnu Smith, another Tennessee Titan. So just make it Titans North, basically. Jonnu Smith, matchup guy, movable chess piece. Those are the two names I'll give you, Tom. What about you?
I almost have, I think, paralysis when I look at the New England Patriots offense. I say there's just so much to do. Let me go over here and look at the defensive side of the ball where there's less that I need to do. It's like a full rebuild. Tear down, rebuild.
It's like me shopping for vegetables in the grocery store. I'm gonna go back over and look at the cereal because I feel more comfortable over there. Yeah.
Right. I'm gonna walk over the cereal. Bill Belichick is more comfortable on the cereal side too. That's the defense, and he's gonna say, "Look, I might lose Lawrence Guy and Adam Butler, who are two of my best defensive linemen. I could lose Dietrich Weiss, who's actually a valuable pass rusher. And there's very few offensive coordinators or offensive tackles who go to the game on the bus and say, oh my God, how are we going to deal with the Patriots front seven? So get better defensively in the front seven by signing Dalvin Tomlinson from the New York Giants. And while you're at it, why don't you stay in the NFC and bring aboard Trey Hendrickson from the New Orleans Saints. 13.5 sacks last year. I got your front seven fixed up right there. You got Dante Hightower coming back. This team, funny, can't hear a thing you're going to say, but they're going to be a team to reckon with.
Well, hopefully the Patriots hear you and make some of those moves that you mentioned. Tom Curran and Phil Perry, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, NBC Sports Boston is where you can catch their latest about the Patriots, and stay tuned with us to hear more. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Kwani.